A few years ago, my anxiety was high. I was already at a point in my life where I thought I was a little out of it. But that was amplified by a lot when I kept repeatedly hearing noises outside my window. Like every single night, it just wouldn't stop. I would finally get so freaked out, I'd go wake my parents and get them to look outside. But they never found anything. I started to think I was just crazy or subconsciously seeking attention. One morning, my grandfather discovered one of our lawn chairs beneath our bathroom window. It's pretty high up, and the bottom pane is fogged, so I'm not sure that the chair even helped, but it was left there regardless. The next night, I heard sounds again. Nothing. The next night, however, we checked outside and discovered something that made my stomach churn. A small stepladder was sitting directly outside my window, back just enough to allow someone to sit on it, but still see. On my windowsill was a bag of now cold McDonald's, which is just up the street from me. Most of the food was still in there, but still, some fucker had been watching me doing absolutely nothing of interest in my room without me knowing for I don't know how long. The cops were called, and nothing happened, of course. I felt crazier than ever. No one was to be found, but at least we had some evidence that someone that shouldn't be hovering around our house was at my window, watching intently through the blinds, in a space between the two curtains. Heard noises the next night, ran outside, and again nothing. Earlier in the night, I'd sewn my curtains together, which hopefully made it harder to see in. Apparently it did, because now the fucker had taken to climbing on top of our air conditioning unit, and from there climbing onto our garage, where they could stand so that they could see above where the drapes went. The handprints and shoe prints were left on the lid to prove it. I should also mention that there were now holes in my screen, and I heard these holes being created. He took a stick and sharpened it somehow, and we found it outside my window. He was trying to stealthily break away the screen bit by bit, and the hole is still there. The next night, I distinctly heard the gravel near my window crunch. There was simply no mistaking the sound. As stealthily as I could, I let out a small moan he surely heard and rolled just out of view, as if I were sleeping, then pressed myself against a wall out of view of the window, very quietly opened my door, and crept down the hall. My heart was pounding. Normally I knock on my parents' door, but I knew the slightest sound would make the bastard bolt, so I quietly opened the door and snuck in, then informed them that there was, without a single doubt in my mind, someone outside my window. They didn't mind the intrusion and got up, got dressed, formulated a plan, and crept to the back door. I ran to the bathroom to stand on the edge of our tub and peek out the window just as the back door was thrown open and my parents ran outside like morons. And sure enough, they saw him. They started screaming as the man leapt off the Herbie and bolted down our driveway, which was what I was looking at. They screamed all sorts of horrible things at the top of their lungs. "You sick motherfucker, I'm gonna fucking kill you," from my dad. "You fucking freak," from my mom. He ended up escaping across the street, hiding behind a house adjacent to us. The balls on this bastard. He kept peeking out at all of us as we stood outside, but we wanted to leave him there so the cops could finally nab him. They were called, they came, and they searched, but they never found him. The bastard must have hopped a fence or some shit. Still, to this day, I hear sounds outside my window, even in the dead of winter, but he's never out there. He might have just been a peeper, but he targeted me specifically and for months until he was almost caught. What really, really pisses me off is that once he lost interest in me because it was too unsafe. He moved on to a house down the street with 2 little girls. He actually managed to get in through their window, and their dad caught him just standing in the middle of the room, watching them sleep. Jacking it, I think. I still don't think he was caught, even then. All I know is that this could have been way worse, but it messed me up. I trust the men in my neighborhood even less now. The men around here stare very blatantly. I've been chased home by one, actually. I've had a guy try to jerk me into his car when I was passing him, telling him no, and that I didn't need a ride, and to just leave me alone. All these years later, I still hear shit outside my window and freak out. It's fucked up. I turn out my lights entirely to exercise, and I do my best to avoid the windows when I undress. It just scarred me, even though I know it wasn't really a huge deal, I guess. There's this guy I met at the same time I met my current boyfriend, even met him in the same place. About 10 years older and totally not my type. I only talk to him when absolutely necessary. Altogether, maybe 2 hours of completely impersonal and polite, I don't have the guts to tell you to fuck off kinds of conversations. Well, my boyfriend and I start dating, and that other guy blows it. Follows us to the club, I notice, freak out, run to the bathroom with a girlfriend, and my boyfriend talks to him. Guy starts acting like a 5-year-old, even cries. At that point, we leave. About a month later, I find a creepy love letter in my mail. He had delivered it himself. That creep had followed me to my door and found out where I lived. Fast forward 1 year, and I no longer frequent the place I met him because he basically lives there. Neither does my boyfriend. Apart from a few awkward, unavoidable run-ins in the city, nothing. Until exactly a year after I started dating my boyfriend. I get a card in the mail, delivered himself, asking me out as if nothing happened and as though we were dating. It was a whole year of no contact. I didn't react, of course. We moved. In the summer, we did have contact. I started noticing the guy at the mall. First, I thought it was a coincidence, but then a shop owner I know tells me the guy is following me and keeps hiding when I turn around. What the fuck? I tell him the whole story. He promises to inform other owners he knows and call mall security next time he sees the creepo. It's been well over 2 years. I don't want to work as a waitress, even though I desperately need the money, because I know he would find me and sit there all day and night watching me. I don't want to work anywhere near the place I met him, which is basically anywhere near city center. I don't go to the mall alone anymore. I don't go to certain supermarkets and cafes because I know he frequents them. I don't even know this guy's last name, and he controls where I go and where I'm cautious, even where we move to. I wish I could leave the city, but I can't. And even if I did, he knows both my first and last name, and I only know his first name and what he looks like. He can easily find me, and it's going to be even easier once I finish university, since I aim for a university teaching position and they display your info on the internet. They have to, for the students. He could come to my open classes or lectures. He could follow me again. I'm scared. My story actually involves an ex-boyfriend. The stalking started after the breakup, but the entire relationship was fucked up. We had been friends for a few years when we started dating my junior year of high school. After we started dating, he completely became a different person. Or maybe let the true him shine through. He'd always grab my phone and look through my text messages and call logs. He wanted to be together all the time, no matter what, even if I was studying. He had already graduated high school and worked full-time at this point. I'd have random crazy girls calling me, telling me they were going to beat me up or they were going to, quote, fuck my man. He'd be insanely jealous, and when we'd fight, he'd get so mad he'd throw his phone across the room or across the street. The whole relationship was crazy, and I tried to end it at least 6 or 7 times over the 1.5-year span of it all. Every time we'd break up, he'd go batshit crazy and do the I'm going to kill myself bit. He'd call and call and call and want to talk and talk and talk until eventually I would say, if I agree to get back together with you, will you back off? I know, not healthy, but I had shit to do, like sports, school, and a job, and didn't have time to deal with it. It was easier just to agree to get back together. One time, I broke up with him, and he told me he had been having headaches, so he went to the doctor that day and found out that he had a brain aneurysm and only had 8 months to live. We had 2 friends die in car accidents on the same day, exactly 1 year apart from each other. So when I realized that 8 months from then would be the same month as our friends' deaths, I was completely freaked out, and we got back together because I honestly believed we had some curse against our friends and that exact date. So here's where it gets really crazy. My senior year, I had no idea how to get out of this relationship, so I started looking into out-of-state colleges, figuring there was no way he'd follow me. He must have seen the brochure from the college I was interested in, because suddenly he wanted to go to that college. He even went as far as taking the SATs. I knew my plan wasn't going to work. He'd follow me wherever I went. So what did I do? I joined the fucking army. That'll show him. Try following me in there, right? Next thing I know, he's meeting with a fucking recruiter. Of course, the likelihood of him being stationed where I was is very slim, but I didn't know that at the time. I was young and scared. I realized the army was a dumb decision, and I wrote the letter to a commissioner, whoever is the head honcho of recruitments. I explained that I had lied on my physical, as the recruiters tell you to do, and sent a copy of all my medical records. I was let out shortly after that. I don't remember how it finally happened, but we actually broke up. I changed my phone number and cut off connection with all our shared friends. Yay! The end of crazy, free at last. Or so I thought. For the next few months after the breakup, he'd randomly show up where I was. The movie theater, the tennis courts, restaurants that we never went to before. He'd want to talk, but I'd always say I had to leave immediately. He'd get furious if he saw me with another guy, no matter who the guy was. It could have been my cousin, and he still would have flipped his shit. I still have no idea how he knew where I was going. Once I left for college, it was about 90 minutes away. I thought it'd be over for sure. I heard he had come up to the college a few times to see other friends, but I'd stay in my dorm those nights, afraid that I'd see him if I went out. During my freshman year of college, one of our close friends from the same friend group killed himself. I came home to attend the funeral. My ex was pretty distraught since that was his third friend of ours to die in 3 years. I had no choice but to be nice to him. I mean, it was a funeral for our good friend. After the funeral, everyone was going over to a friend's house just to spend time together. I didn't want to go, but my friends convinced me anyway. While at the house, the ex starts talking to me. I act polite, but try to avoid him. Naturally, this doesn't work. He's right next to me all night, trying to kiss me, put his arm around me, whatever he could get. Somewhere, this translates into him thinking we're back together. I tell him I'm leaving. He freaks out, and he gets my number somehow from someone else at the party. He starts texting and calling, and texting and calling, all the time. This continued for 5 years. 5 years. I moved out of state now, and I don't talk to anyone from back then anymore. Finally, the phone calls stopped. I still get weird whenever I go back to my hometown. I'm constantly surveying the area, scared that I'm going to see him again. And if I happen to be with my significant other, I won't even venture into any part of the city that I think there's a chance he could be in. I once had a classmate. Let's call him Bob. Bob was in a glass closet. He would reaffirm his straightness by repeatedly hitting on all the girls in class. One day, I suggested he explore and embrace his sexuality, instead of hiding and running from it. He decided to prove to everyone how straight he was by dating me, to prove me wrong. The day after that, in chemistry class, Bob excitedly told me he was now my lab partner. "It's chemistry," he exclaimed. I tolerated it. I tolerated Bob spewing unfunny science-ish jokes and trying to edge closer to me. I tolerated him finding me in between classes to give me gifts of fortune cookies. I figured he would just tire and drop the whole thing. I was wrong. One afternoon, a bit after I got home from school, the doorbell rang. I looked outside, and it was Bob. This was in the era when internet was dial-up and few people had it. The time when we still paid money to remove our name and address from phone book listings. The only way he could have learned where I lived was to follow me. When I turned away without answering the door, he began to bang on the door and scream my name. I ended up having to chase him off with a baseball bat. The next day, I went to school and told the administrators what had happened. Turns out, this isn't the first time Bob had done this to a girl. He had stalked some half a dozen other girls and begged for dates. I'm not sure what happened afterward, and if he was put into counseling or punished or what. All I know was Bob stopped going to school and pretty much nobody spoke of him again. I had a friend from high school who definitely fit into stalker territory. Basically, it was common knowledge that he had a thing for me. I kept rejecting him, first more subtly and then just downright. No, never. It's not going to happen, ever. I figure, whatever, we're in high school, he'll get over it. Eventually, I'm in my senior year of college. His sister goes to a university a bit south of mine, whereas his is a bit north. They ask if they can meet up at my place and stay the night, so we can all get together and visit again. I say that sounds fine, and things go pretty well. Eventually they both leave. My roommates have some of those magnetic letters they keep on the fridge, which I don't pay much attention to. But the morning after he left, my roommate is obviously reading something. She turns to ask me if I wrote this. I read it, and it turns out it's actually a ridiculously over-the-top love poem. I'm immediately horrified because I know exactly where this came from, and my roommates are laughing their asses off. A few days later, I get an email from the guy. He talks about the poem and how he woke up in the middle of the night and saw me reading it and how hot that was or whatever. I'm trying to figure out how the fuck he could have seen me reading a poem I never saw until after he had left, when I remembered that his sister had dyed her hair the same color as mine. So without his glasses, he must have mistaken her for me. More time passes while I try to avoid the guy in the hopes that he gets the message I've been trying to impact on him for years now. I start looking for jobs abroad for when I graduate, and the guy sends me this email about how if I'm going to move abroad, we really need to get married so that he can justify following me to his parents, and how he's going to need me to support him when he does follow me because he has no desire to learn the language of the country I'm planning on going to. He figures this is a mutually beneficial arrangement, as eventually I'll be able to profit off the tax deductions one gets from being married. So even though he knows I'm not interested in him, this is clearly the most logical option for me, so I don't wind up dying sad and alone after paying full taxes for my whole life. It devolves into this ramble about how he hates characters in TV shows and books who do this whole, I just want the person I love to be happy, whoever that's with, because he thinks it's more logical for them to just kill that other person and narrow the love interest down. I reply to this email, completely pissed off and more creeped out than I had ever been in my life. He seems to get the message, apologizes, and I cut off ties as best as I can. He gets a girlfriend. I figured this is good. Maybe he's moving on. She adds me on Facebook and starts talking to me. She goes on about how the sex is amazing and I'm really missing out, and how I should just really sleep with this guy. I tell her I'm in no way interested, and she goes on about her other boyfriend back home and how all four of us could get married together on the same day. Completely repulsed, I block her. It's been 3 years since then, and now he's back in my hometown and moved in with the only 3 friends I have from high school. They seem to think he's finally over it, so I can only hope. I moved back to my hometown not too long ago and reconnected with an old friend. Her brother got out of prison around the same time. I went to visit her family and he was there. The visit goes great for the exception that her brother will not stop staring at me. I don't think too much about it. I'm accustomed to creepers and figure I've known this family since I was a teenager many moons ago. I think I'm creeped out over nothing. Fast forward a few months, same friend and I go to a show. We had a bit of car trouble before getting there, and the friend's brother happens to be there with his friends. He begins by making lewd comments to me and spends the entire night trying to get uncomfortably close to me. I end up using his sister as a human shield. After the show, I get separated from my friend due to the crowd. Her brother, however, finds me right away and insists that his sister told me to give me a ride since her car is acting wonky. I refuse, and he is trying to pull me towards his car, or a dark alley, who knows. I yell for him to let me go and grab the attention of some nearby good guys who come to my aid. When my friend finally finds me, I tell her what happened. She lets me know she never told him to give me a ride. 2 weeks later, I begin getting texts from her phone. Sexually suggestive texts. I love my friend, but I'm pretty sure she doesn't want to see me naked wrapped around her like some of the messages suggest. I called her mother's landline, and she asked me if I had seen her daughter's phone, as it's missing. I tell her I got some texts from it, and she says she will call me back. In the meantime, I figure out it's her brother, as he won't stop texting and finally calls. I'm your neighbor. I'm coming over, and you better let me in. No thank you, sir. I call his mom back and let her know what is going on. I look out my window, and there is his car parked across the street, and it's still running. He's just sitting there, and I can see him talking on the phone. It looks like he is screaming. In the meantime, a police car happens to drive by, and he takes off as soon as possible. His mom calls me back and apologizes for her son's behavior and tells me he won't be bothering me ever again. And he hasn't. I was in a 7-Eleven, and this guy kept smiling at me across the coffee counter. Okay, no big deal. Happens sometimes. He starts talking to me, says he thinks he knows a friend of mine. Now that I think about it, it was a generic name like Matt or Chris, and I was young and stupid. So I gave him my number and told him to text me sometime. He texted me before I even got home, not even 10 minutes. Something along the lines of, "You're pretty, I can't stop thinking about you, blah blah, we should hang out." So young and stupid me says, "Sure, I have to go to Borders tomorrow, do you want to come along?" After that day, he starts texting me all the time, even if I don't respond. Random things, that could also be, "I want to get to know you" things, so I didn't think anything of it. After a week or so of this, and realizing he was in no way my type, I started blowing him off. I never met up with him again because I felt something was off with this guy. I told him I met someone, and he started being weird as fuck, telling me he's in love with me. He can't stop thinking about me, all this weird and obsessive stuff. I tell him to leave me alone and to stop texting me. He's crazy and can't love me if he doesn't even know me, and that he's freaking me out. A few days later, he texts me that he's sorry and wants to hang out. I tell him I was out and busy, even though I was at home with a friend. He says, "Okay, I'll wait." I'm like, "What the fuck? Wait?" My friend and I walk through my house to the kitchen, passing the bay window, and I see this guy parked outside my house. I never told him where I lived, never told him my last name, and even so, the house is under my mother's name, which is completely different than mine. I tell my friend, and she tells me to text him and say something along the lines of, "My friend is at my house. Are you parked in front of it? You're creeping her out. Leave now." He tells me okay, he's leaving, and that he's sorry. We watch from the window as the dude backs up my dead-end street until he's blocked by trees, parks and just sits there. I text him again. "Really? She watched you. She can still see you. Leave or I'm calling the cops." He backs to the end of my street and starts telling me, "It's a public street, there's nothing you can do. Just talk to me." We stayed in the house and called a bunch of guy friends. I texted Creepo and told him if he won't leave, our friends will make him leave. He finally goes, but keeps texting me every day. Finally, my current fiancé, at the time we had just started dating, tells him if he doesn't stop, he'll beat the crap out of him. I block his number, and he stops. A few months later, he starts texting me from a new number. He ended up changing his number 4 times throughout all of this to get around me blocking him. "I still love you." And other weird stuff out of nowhere. I don't respond, and he stops. A few months after that, I'm pregnant, and my fiancé and I had been engaged for 6 months. He pops up out of nowhere, and I go ballistic. I call the cops, I let them know everything, and I file a report. I inform the creep of all of this and tell him if he ever contacts me again, I will take it as a threat against me and my son and my family, and he will regret it. My fiancé then takes his number and threatens him as well. It's almost been 2 years now with no contact. Thank God. When I was 15 years old, I started attending a rather prestigious Christian school. Yeah, uniforms and the whole bit. I'd grown up very sheltered, thus I wasn't really used to any kind of male attention, which I got, having developed early, in great quantities. Usually I was either embarrassed or convinced that the guys were playing some kind of joke on me. I didn't believe that I was really all that attractive. Then, one day I found a note on my locker. It was a plain white index card folded over and sealed with a little foil heart sticker. Inside, it simply said, "I think you're beautiful," in careful print. That one got to me. It was very, very different from what I was used to. Basically leering, dirty comments are prepositions. That was sweet, innocent, and touching. I wondered who had sent it, but I didn't really have any way of finding out. So I stuck it in one of my notebooks and began to daydream about who might be my secret admirer. Was it the cute boy who gave me a pencil in my homeroom? Maybe it was my lab partner, who I found utterly adorable, even though he was a few years older than I was. I was a ditzy, moony-eyed teenage girl dreaming of puppy love and maybe my first kiss. I took the note out whenever I was sad or upset, and it always made me smile. But weeks had passed and I had no idea at all who had left it. I began to worry that maybe it really wasn't for me at all. Maybe someone had just put it in the wrong locker by mistake. I was feeling down on myself and a little silly when I opened my locker one morning, and behold, another note. Same little white index card, folded over and sealed with the same little foil heart. Trembling with excitement and anticipation, I carefully peeled one lobe of the heart up and read the following words. "You are so lovely." Like any dopey kid would, I held the note to my chest, sighing, with a dumb grin on my face. 2 notes? It was no accident. Someone really liked me. Wow. I made a dumb little scrapbook thing and tucked the notes inside. I also began trying again in earnest to discern the identity of my secret admirer. But with only 2 unsigned notes as clues, I didn't get very far. I knew that whomever left these notes had to go to my school, that was obvious, but I didn't know much else. Maybe my admirer wasn't a guy at all. Damn, I didn't like mysteries I couldn't solve. During this time, I had been building a friendship with a classmate. We'll call him Mark. Mark was a sophomore, and I was a senior, but we had AP Latin together. We shared a free period as well, and sometimes hung out in the library, as we were both avid readers. Mark wasn't exactly my type, if a 15-year-old can be said to even have one, but he was sweet, and we had many common interests. As we spent more time together, I started thinking that the notes were from him. Then one day, he confessed to liking me, and I had my answer. Or so I thought. Mark told me how he felt over stale fundraising donuts eaten on the back of the wall behind the gym. I laughed, getting powdered sugar all over my stupid vest. "Why the big charade?" I asked. "Why didn't you just tell me to begin with instead of leaving those mysterious notes?" Mark's face fell. "What notes? I didn't send you any notes." The mystery continues. But now I had a co-conspirator. Another week, another note. "I think about you always." Aw. Mark was starting to exhibit some signs of jealousy, which I brushed off. After all, we didn't know who the mystery note sender was. Time went on, and I started losing focus in class. My grades didn't slip or anything. I made up for it, but as a normally attentive student, there was a clear shift in my attention. I went from listening intently to a talk on Greek mythology to being called on, not knowing the answer because I was too busy staring off into the distance and imagining my secret admirer as some sort of tuxedo mask-like figure who would someday reveal himself and give me a rose and a dashing smile. The next note said, "You smell like love itself." Huh. I didn't really know how to take that one. I smelled like a combination of L'Oreal Kids cherry shampoo and cotton candy body fantasies. But if that was what love smelled like, then okay. The next note said, "I want to touch you." Okay, that's a little creepy, but maybe in some kind of sweet way, right? Mark was freaked out and said I should go to the authorities, or at least the headmistress. I was dead set against that. I might scare away my admirer, if not get him or her in trouble. I didn't want to do that, so I tucked the note away with the others and waited for the next one. I spent the night at a friend's house at some point. Typical teenage stuff. We watched stupid movies, gossiped about everything, ate junk food, and played with makeup. It was a great time, though by then I had begun to realize that I was a better fit with the boys. When I left the following morning, something caught my eye and stopped my heart. On my friend's mailbox, shimmering innocently in the 10 a.m. light, was a foil heart. Okay, now I was officially freaked out. I ran back inside and told my friend and her mother. Both of them seemed to think I was on something or overreacting. It was, after all, February. Heart stickers were everywhere. That one might have been there for a while and I just hadn't noticed it. I ended up dropping it, but inside I was still afraid. Monday morning, another note. "I want to taste you." Okay, this wasn't cool anymore, not at all, but I didn't know what to do. I talked about it to Mark, who convinced me to approach the school's very own safety officer, who proceeded to laugh at me. "Kid, if I went after every hormone-addled guy with a crush who didn't have the balls to admit it, I'd be here forever." Yeah, okay. I stole one of my father's pocket knives and began carrying it around with me, for protection. I stopped going to my usual after-school activities and hurried for my bus as soon as the bell rang. I always took the seat closest to the door in class, so I could see if anyone looked in, or looked suspicious as they passed by. And I found more heart stickers. It felt like they were everywhere I looked. I started having panic attacks whenever I saw them. On the window of my mother's car, on the table I sat at lunch, on the door at the girls' room after I left. Mark wanted me to go to the real cops, but I couldn't make myself do it, not after the way safety guy had treated me. I didn't want to be laughed at again. It's a major issue for me not to be taken seriously. So I did nothing. I suffered in silence. Until one day I came home and got the mail. Just like always. Only this time, mixed in with the catalogs and bills was a plain white envelope sealed with one of those goddamn evil foil hearts. Inside it were pictures. Horrible pictures. Pictures of a grown man in various states of undress, doing things to himself. And a note. I bet your blood tastes like chocolate. I started screaming, which got my mother's attention. She called the police, who came out to the house and took a report. Luckily, I recognized the man in the photos, and there were more than enough evidence to arrest the slimeball. He was the school janitor. This is a throwaway for various reasons. I used to play Counter-Strike 1.6 a lot as an influential female admin in a large gaming community. In a way, I helped kids and girls get along with hormone-driven boys and would stick up for my girls if needed, handle abusive kid admins, all that jazz. The way the community was run was that there were regular admins who could buy admin status off a website, and hire admins like myself who would regulate them. There was a new admin who was a young guy, and he heard my voice in server policing others, and sent me a message to say hi. Friendly enough, I thought. After a while, he starts messaging me asking for my first name. I tell him I don't give out personal information online. He then states he's going to call me Militia until I do. He only talked about himself and how great he was, and how he was going to be a teacher. He even showed me his Facebook, having a real girlfriend already, and wanted me to be his mistress. After trying to be polite for a while, being his direct superior, I finally snapped and told him to stop trying to force his feelings onto me, and that his advances were unwanted. And if that he continued, I would contact his girlfriend and show her the screens of his conversations. He then turned 180 and called me a disgusting girl and vile. Funny, considering I could remove all his admin rights. A short while later, some of the girls in the community came to me with complaints about his behavior. No surprise there. He was doing the same shit again, but with 17-year-old girls this time. One of the girls asked if we should bait him and bust him for being a pedo, and I casually told her jokingly, "Only if you want to." I didn't think much of it, but he was rather busy for the next week or so and not harassing anyone, so I thought the storm had passed. Nope. He was busy courting and trying to seduce this 17-year-old girl who was going to ruin him. He was messaging her every day to the point she had to lie about going to the hospital to get a break. She Googled a nude picture similar to her and gave him one of those to get a flurry of dick pictures back. He started telling her he wanted her to move to his state that was 1,500 miles away and have her be his secret girlfriend until she turned 18 so he could marry her. Mind you, this guy wanted to be an elementary school teacher. So she's finally had enough. She takes all of the pictures he sent her with entire nudes, including his face and groin, and makes a compiled picture with all of the nudes and his profile picture from Facebook, and posts it online. A few friends from the community also sent the image to his boss, the superintendent, and other emails to ruin him. I heard someone tried to send one to his girlfriend as well. This guy was hated in the community, not only for being an arrogant guy who thought his shit didn't stink because he was a teacher, but also because he creeped on younger girls and hacked blatantly. So I log in one day and there's a shit storm of everyone either laughing his life is ruined or screaming and pointing fingers that it was cruel and evil to do so. Much of the blame was pointed at me for even approving the idea. I had no idea she would actually go so far, and even she felt bad after all the aftermath. He was fired the next day, and had to work at a Salvation Army from then on. Someone in the community linked with the Teachers Association sent an email to them too, so his teacher career was ruined. You would think after all of this, he would try to cut off all contact and try to better and improve his life. Nope. He stalks me and a few other girls down who were involved and sends death threats through spams of texts and calls screaming he's gonna find me and drive off of a cliff with me in the car. So, we were all evil and vile women for baiting him and ruining his life for no reason at all. He called the girl who he had sent the pics to and tried to tell her that he was going to send her to jail for it, and it was her fault. She replied and said, "I didn't send the dick pics, you did, and good luck trying to get me in jail for getting you fired rightfully when I'm underage." Since then, no one has heard from him, and I hope he stays offline for good.